Thank you for this opportunity. It's a fantastic day to be here on Constitution Day. I'm going to suggest to you something that might be a little bit radical. There's no such thing as a new idea. What? I thought we were all coming up with new critical thinking skills, creative thinking skills, right? Well, I'm going to say that there's no such thing as a new idea, and I'm going to prove to you today. For as long as I can remember, I have been drawn to history, particularly women's history and strong women history. And I'm going to bring these two topics together, and one will be the foundation, and one will be the example of this foundational philosophy in action. Okay? So what is a true education? Plato pointed out that man is the gentle and divine being if he have been made so by true education. But if he be subjected to none or to a false one, he is the most interactable thing in the world. So again, I ask you, what is a true education? And I want you to think of this for a moment. This is a audience engagement time. So back in 1976, hot day in Philadelphia, the First Lady of Philadelphia approaches Dr. Benjamin Franklin. "Dr. Franklin, what have you given us, sir?" He replied, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." I find it interesting that Benjamin Franklin would actually assume that she knows what a republic is. I also find it interesting that she may know what it is, what was her educational background, and to think that it was a personal charge to her and to the citizenry to keep it. Wasn't it their job to do that? Is anything taught in schools today through the Common Core, even close to what we should know on how to keep the republic? I would strongly suggest that no, that nothing is being directed towards keeping a republic. In fact, according to a recent Gallup poll, 55% of our millennial generation believe in socialism, far removed from a republic. So what about a democracy? Democracy is it, right? We are all promoting our democracy. Every other word on the news channel or by politicians, it's about a democracy. In the Federalist Papers, it was repeatedly mentioned that a democracy is an enemy to liberty. In fact, Benjamin Rush made it clear that a simple democracy is pure evil, is one of the greatest of evils. Well, then apparently that's not going to work as well. De Tocqueville warned America against going down the path of democracy. He pointed out that in a democracy, individualism could be a lonely position if genealogy, family history, and history in general were not taught. He said, thus, quote, "Thus not only does democracy make every man forget his ancestors, but it hides his descendants and separates his contemporaries from him. It throws him back forever upon himself alone and threatens in the end to confine him entirely without the solitude of his own heart." Are we not seeing history rewritten? Are we not seeing monuments being torn down? Just recently, the Texas publishers said that they're writing out the history of Hillary Clinton. While I'm not a fan of Mrs. Clinton, I believe that her history is important to teach so that we may learn from what she has done, so that we may not follow what she has done. So what form of education is needed today? How are we going to save our republic? This past summer, it was announced here in Utah that a Mount Liberty College was going to be opening up in the state. And it was in the beginning stages, and I'm very, very excited because I would like to go back and finish my degree. Their focus is to offer the classical liberal arts degree. It's needed, right? We've heard Elon Musk say that it's needed today. We heard that Steve Jobs said that students of a classical liberal arts are more creative, so it's needed. I met with 2 members of the board, and I asked them. They're both going to be professors there, Jennifer Jensen and Lorraine Sempler, and asked them if there was a need for a classical liberal arts education. They told me classical liberal arts education is all about the study of human nature through the ages. It is vital for a society to know our roots. When we divorce education from the past, we divorce ourselves from what matters, and that is human nature and how it remains the same. The knowledge of human nature helps us to understand society around us and how we got here, as well as where we are going based on our actions. So I found an example of this. In my study of women history, I found the sentiments of an American woman. It was written, presumably, by First Lady of Pennsylvania, Esther Reed, who at the time had raised over $300,000 for the Continental Army. She wrote, "I call to mind with enthusiasm and admiration of all those acts of courage, of consistency and patriotism, which history has transmitted to us, people favored by heaven, preserved from destruction by virtues, the zeal and the resolution of Deborah, of Judith, of Esther, the fortitude of the mother of the Maccabees in giving her son to die before her eyes. Rome saved from the fury of a victorious enemy by the efforts of Volumnia and other Roman ladies. So many famous sieges where the women have been seen forgetting the weaknesses of their sex, building new walls, digging trenches with their feeble hands, furnishing arms to their defenders, they themselves darting the missile weapons of the enemy, resigning the ornaments of their apparel and their fortune to fulfill the public treasury and to hasten the deliverance of their country, burying themselves under its ruins, throwing themselves into the flames rather than to submit into the disgrace of humiliation before a proud enemy. Born for liberty, disclaiming to bear the irons of tyrannical government, we associate ourselves to the grandeur of these sovereigns, cherished and revered, who have held so much splendor, the scepter of the greatest states. She names the Batildas, the Elizabeths, referring to Elizabeth I, the Maries, referring to Marie Antoinette, the Catherines, referring to Catherine the Great of Russia, who have extended the empires of liberty and contended to reign by sweetness and justice, who have broken the chains of slavery forged by tyrants in the times of ignorance and barbarity. I would love to know, what history is she referring to with Elizabeth I and Catherine the Great? Because what we are told is that they themselves were tyrants and horrible, correct? Esther goes on to mention the valor of Joan of Arc, the Maiden of Orleans. Right? An educated woman in the 18th century looked to examples of courageous women in the scriptures and in history as examples of fighting for liberty. It makes me, so why are we not seeking the same examples today? Who can we add to that list? And are there modern examples of that today? Years ago, I started a group called Mom's Group, Meeting of the Minds and Souls. I was looking for more depth, not superfluous stuff. More depth of knowledge on any subject that we could start talking about, including the scriptures and history. Imagine to my surprise when I found out that a similar movement had happened during the American Revolutionary War. The movement was called the Republican Motherhood. How fantastic that is. It was the idea that a woman could unite her seemingly contradictory loyalties to the home and to the state. Abigail Adams thought so. Elizabeth Powell believed so, as well as countless women of the past, both known and unknown, that have shown us time and again that courage and sacrifice and service, teaching, preserving, persevering, and virtue, what they look like. A classical liberal arts education can do that for us all, men and women. The classics, great books, and original sources, both good and bad, help us to understand what others have said and not just opinions of what others have said. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus expected that his perception of the histories were questioned by the reader as being true or false. He knew his writings were open to interpretations, unlike modern historians today. On the subject of women, according to Dr. Thomas Martin, professor at the College of Holy Cross, Herodotus reports on significant actions by women, especially the non-Greeks. In his documents 1, 5, and 6, Herodotus clearly understood that gender relations are central in the ways to which human beings organize their world, with sometimes separate and together sometimes overlapping roles for men and women. Montesquieu, in his writing Spirit of the Laws, concluded that women could not live under any other form of government and that it was in their best interest to live under a republic. In Book 5 of the Republic, Plato included women in politics and that the same employment could be offered to men and women. But as Herodotus pointed out, traditional gender roles are valued and we recognize the limitations of them. Men and women complement each other because of our differences, not because we are the same. The beauty of a republic is that we are able to keep our identity of who we are. We don't have to be identified by a group. And it allows for the question of public liberty and civic freedom, the balance of law and liberty together that influences each of us as individuals. These noble quests alone are something both men and women can collaborate on together. So I will repeat my beginning question. What is a true education? Did you come up with an answer? To me, true education is not aiming for college and career readiness, as the national leaders of today's educational forums are saying. College and career are byproducts. They're not the end goal. To me, education involves character, virtue, and truth. Truth, the same as yesterday, is the same today as it will be the same tomorrow. Not stopping to question until you find the original source. Sometimes that means you pause for a time as events bring the original sources to you. Professor Jennifer Jensen, stated that true education is turning a man or a woman into a higher thinking creature, recognizing truth and virtue, and then acting on it, and that's the hard part. Abraham Lincoln famously is quoted as saying, "The philosophy of the school and the classroom in one generation will be the philosophy of the government in the next." Socialism, right? Students today are not being taught these original sources. Recently, the College Board, whose president at one time was a self-proclaimed Marxist, cut ancient history from the world AP courses up to year 1200 AD. So much that if all Western heritage and the birth of liberty has been cut from its sources. It is an extreme risk in favor of tyranny. Democracy is an action word. It means it's a means to an end for suppressors and dictators. History shows a repetitive of this, and only the classical liberal arts education can show us exactly how to save and indeed keep our republic. A classical liberal arts education can define what is good, true, right, and beautiful. It suggests the source of good, the dependence on and a responsibility to God. Our Creator is the source of goodness, justice, mercy, compassion, beauty. A classical liberal arts education teaches us what those things are, and isn't that what we want for our children? I'm grateful to be here today. I'm grateful to have been a part of this modern day movement of Republican motherhood, of teaching the Constitution what liberty means for each one of us. So I thank you for your time.